So, Hope Bohanec is author of The Ultimate Betrayal. Is There Happy Meat? It's about the truth behind the so-called humane and sustainable labeling, both ethically and environmentally. Hope is also an event organizer at Sonoma County Vegfest, at Berkeley Earth Day, and she's executive director at Compassionate Living and project manager at United Poultry Concerns. She's a busy woman. In addition, Hope is preparing currently for a climate diet summit in mid-April that hopefully will happen in some form, and took some time out of her busy schedule to talk with us today. It's great to see you, Hope.
Thank
And
you.
let's start by, talking about um, speciesism. It seems that the reason that so many activists are so active is because there are so many things that are fundamentally wrong about the way we humans have organized ourselves on this beautiful planet. And animal rights activists often talk about this word, the speciesism, as the underlying kind of cause that continues this animal exploitation. Can you explain to us what speciesism is all about?
Yeah, definitely. I kind of want to back up just a little bit and just start by acknowledging, the crazy place we're in right now, because
Hmm.
it's so prominent in my mind, and I'm sure everyone's mind, with this coronavirus crisis. And, this is the first interview actually I've given since, all this craziness has happened. And so it was really interesting to prepare today because I don't know, I'm in a different headspace than I have been, in just this kind of anxious, crazy world now. And I want to acknowledge first, just all the activists that this has affected, and small vegan businesses, vendors. um, I know so many people that rely almost exclusively, their income is from veg fests and vegan events, and they go to a different vegan event every weekend, and they have all been canceled. So their whole source of income is just completely shut down. Not only to not all, also to mention all of those, that wonderful activism and outreach being shut down. And then on a personal level, myself and other activists of my type, we are community activists. We are out in the world doing, outreach events on college campuses, and big events and small events. And I'm giving presentations at VegFest and all of that. And that is all just like whoosh, just gone away, totally shut down. And it's intense. And I just kind of want to acknowledge that there's, it's a lot right now. And I hope very much that what it does is it causes us to go inward, get creative, get a different renewed energy to do what we do differently and maybe better, and not be caught in the same rut. I've been doing the exact close to the same activism for 30 years. Maybe that needs to change. So I'm trying to look at this as a blessing, but it's intense. Anyway, I just kind of wanted to acknowledge that. Oh, and kind of a little announcement that's exciting. I am looking into starting a podcast and seeing if I could maybe, shift to more online activism like a podcast. And I love podcasts. So anyway, so that's exciting. But getting into speciesism, which I think is a really great place to start, because we'll define it first. And speciesism is, of course, like other isms, racism, sexism, it is the false perception that one species is dominant or more important than another species. And of course, all kinds of abuses and things can happen with that kind of mentality and that kind of mindset. And actually, speciesism is at the heart of this pandemic. I mean, speaking about this pandemic, what was the root cause? Well, dominating, confining, killing, and eating animals. In this case, it was wildlife, wild animals, and in numerous other epidemics, it's been eating wildlife as well. Ebola, AIDS, other epidemics are connected to our encroachment on wild places. And, we just had actually in the last few months, if everybody, I mean, we're in such a crisis here, but we can remember back just a few months ago, we had a massive crisis of the Amazon burning, and it still is. And that yet again is us encroaching on wild places with devastating effects on the planet and on ourselves. But it's not only wild animals, domesticated and domestic animals as well are confining and killing for our food system. Domestic animals causes all kinds of other epidemics, SARS, the H1N1, swine flu, bird flu, all of these came from our, butchering and being close to in a very disturbing way, butchering and eating animals, these cause these epidemics. So these, I don't want to make a blanket statement that, if we all just went vegan, every problem in the world would go away. Of course, it's very complicated. There's a lot going on in the world, but of course, going vegan, there's so many benefits, not only to ourselves, to the animals, to the planet, but now here's another one, yet another one. These are epidemics of our own making because of our confining and eating animals. So yet another place where we can, certainly make a difference for the world by promoting veganism. But I do kind of want to acknowledge something that I think has been interesting and I've been thinking about during this pandemic. I kind of want to acknowledge the good that is happening, the beauty in this, the social distancing, the stay-at-home order, and everyone, doing this. They're not necessarily only doing it for themselves and to keep themselves healthy, but we're doing it for others, for care and compassion of the elderly, of people with underlying medical conditions, these more vulnerable people, humans in our society, and we're all sacrificing and losing our jobs, all kinds of things to care for these vulnerable people. And this is really a beautiful thing. I think that this taps into really like a care ethic that is good and that we need to embrace. And logic can start coming in, like, oh, but what if the economic crisis hurts more people in the long run, and all of that. Yes, we can make those analyses, but right now people are dying. And so taking these steps, I think, is a really good place to be, to tap into that compassion and care, like I was saying. And then if we can just expand that circle of compassion and care to include non-human animals, to include the planet, to include the entirety of our world and everything that we're connected to as humans, I think we're going to get there. I hope we will get there, and I hope this may help us to get there.
Yeah, it's certainly having the humans on pause, I think, is a really interesting phenomena from the perspective of all the other creatures on the earth and the earth herself. Suddenly there's no airplanes in the sky and there's no cars on the road and the pollution is less, and the animals. My brother in Wales sent me a video of wild goats that are now roaming through the little towns in Wales. And
wow,
it's a whole different, it's a time for us to really reflect, I think, on what's going on and what is it about our society that has brought us to this point, and what is it about our society now that's working to get us out of it, and then what parts aren't working so well. And I agree with you. I hope that this is an opportunity to expand the circle of compassion that we're feeling now towards our neighbors, towards the animals as well. I find it sort of ironic that, now we're trapped in our cages.
yeah,
right? And so many others are, simply because of our belief that it's okay for us to do that. Do you want to get into some of the details about, if we started with chickens? Because I listened to a video with Dr. Bernard, who claims that all influenza pretty much can be traced back to the domestication and entrapment of chickens. And there's a lot that people don't know about chickens, and they're amazing creatures, but they live in these crazy situations.
Yeah, yeah, it's true. And yeah, and it's really interesting what you were saying about the wildlife kind of coming back to places and the pollution going down. It shows how quickly Mother Earth could heal herself. And I mean, it's just kind of amazing, you know. It's like, oh, if we just gave her the chance, she could just heal so quickly. It's a beautiful thing to see. Absolutely. So with chickens though, yeah, chickens, you know, I work for United Poultry Concerns. I'm doing, well, I was doing a ton for them. Now we're having to reassess and figure out, you know, how to bring it all online, and we're doing that. But you know, actually this year, the year 2020, is UPC's 30-year anniversary. Karen Davis founded the organization in 1990. And you know, when in 1990, when she wanted to start this organization, she was told, why on earth are you going to do an organization for chickens? You know, we can't get people to care about whales. How on earth are we going to get people to care about chickens? You know, but she persisted, and what she said was, well, all the more reason to have an organization for chickens. You know, and so she really focused on chickens. I think that it's important to focus on chickens for numerous reasons. I mean, not only, I mean, arguably they are the most abused, entrapped, and suffering animals on earth in the largest numbers, you know. And what we're seeing now, it's interesting because the trends are shifting. People are eating, you know, less beef, less pork. However, they can be, the numbers of chicken eating and egg eating has increased. And so people are shifting to eating chicken. And I think that there's a lot of reasons for that. One being that people, for some reason, have this, you know, this crazy and really untrue perception that chickens are somehow not as, you know, not as bright, not as emotional, all those things. You know, we can really, you know, see the facial expressions, for instance, on a pig, but chickens, birds' faces aren't as expressive, whatever. Well, there has been an abundance of science done in the last 3-4 decades on birds in general and chickens specifically, on their cognitive ability, on their emotional lives, all these things. And it has been absolutely scientifically documented that avians are just as have just as rich an emotional life as mammals. They have the capacity for pain and suffering, just as the capacity to you know, be lonely and be bored, and all these things, just as we know mammals do, just as we know our dogs and cats do. So chickens are no different, and they should be afforded no less protection or affection or you know, so people are in this place where they think, oh well, I'll have chicken because it's a little better, a little less suffering. No, that's not the case at all. You know, it's not the case at all. And environmentally too, people often think, you know, beef is the environmental, you know, bad player, and oh, I got to avoid red meat, so I'll eat the white meat, it's going to be a little better. Not necessarily at all. No, I mean, when it's really the comparisons with the environmental impact, water use, air pollution, greenhouse gas emissions, all these things. When you're comparing, you know, beef and chicken, it's very minimal. Comparing any animal product to plant-based diet, then you're going way down in the numbers. Then you're really making an impact. But in some instances, like water use, actually, chicken meat and chicken production is worse on water use than beef. So, you know, all animal products have a heavy impact on the environment, not just chickens.
Can I just interrupt you for a moment?
Yeah.
So I believe it's Cowspiracy where they talk about how a third of the Earth's land base is used for animal agriculture. So a third of the Earth. And I think that you said in the talk that I listened to, which was really interesting when you were in Hawaii, saying that 90% of the animals raised for food on that one third is chickens.
That's
Is that
right.
right? And
That's
turkey.
right. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. 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 I mean, the amount of chickens that are raised compared to pigs and cows, it's staggering. I can't remember the exact numbers, but for like every one cow slaughtered, there's 20 chickens slaughtered. For every one, pig slaughtered, it's so many chickens. So there's so many more. Their bodies are much smaller. And they don't feed as many people. So unfortunately, they have to kill many more. And so that's another interesting thing. People will switch from beef to chicken, thinking, "Oh, well, I'm not causing much suffering. There's not as many." I'm reducing the suffering, but actually there's more animals dying. You're killing more animals by switching to chicken, so you can actually cause more suffering. But yeah, and the land use thing is really critical. We have very, very little land available for anything, really. I mean, the population is growing so much, we're taking over so much of the planet. And that's what's interesting, one of the things that I get into in my book, because my book is about, of course, smaller scale and these labels that we see, the humane and cage-free and free range. And one of the interesting things about the whole locavore movement and the free ranging of animals and giving animals more space and all of this, um, we just simply don't have the planet to do it. We don't have the land to do it. It was estimated that it would take closer to 5 planet Earths to be able to free range all of the farmed animals that we have confined right now.
Wow.
So we just can't do it. I mean, this free ranging of animals is really just a fairy tale. It's nothing more than for a few elite buyers. It could never be scaled up to feed 7 billion people. We just don't have the land space for it. So it's interesting that locavores are really into local animal food, because if they really would understand and look at the numbers, you'd realize that scaling up, you can't do it with animal products. You have to do it plant-based. If locavores really want everyone to eat locally, then they better get on board with vegan, because that's really the only way to do it.
Right. Right. On the same piece of land that we could grow food to feed the chickens or the cows, we could feed a
Half the
bundle
town.
more times
Yeah.
of people. I mean, yeah, I have a balcony and I can produce a huge amount of food just even on my balcony. It's
Yep.
quite astounding, and in the fall when the harvest comes and the trees are throwing their fruit down, and I mean, there's some people they invite other people into the yards to eat the food. It's absolutely possible to feed the world with veganism. So let's talk about some of these labels, because we're under the impression for people who do, want to do the right thing, but haven't figured out how or why to shift away from eating the odd egg or the odd chicken. But they feel like they're doing it right because they're buying the specially labeled organic or free range. What about those labels?
Yeah, well, I have done extensive research into these labels. When I was researching for my book, I interviewed numerous people that worked at these places with small scale labeled products and names. Went to these places. I live in Northern California, and in the Sonoma and Marin County areas, there's so much of this going on. You drive out, in West County, and you just see organic dairy after organic egg, and all these places that have these labels.
Mm-hmm.
But when you actually go onto the farm, which I did and have, what you see is very different. And then there's also some amazing undercover footage, undercover videos, and activists that have gone into these places. So I've done extensive research on it. And what I found, and it was interesting because going into the book, I thought that I was going to be saying things like, well, free range is good, but going vegan's best, or organic is better, but going vegan's best. No, I really did not end up saying any of that, because what I found was either there was no difference, really there was no difference, or that the differences varied so widely from farm to farm that you just couldn't get a sense of each label. And then in some instances, it was actually worse for the animals on these labeled farms. So you really, it's such a wide variety of stuff going on. But on an inherent level, there's cruelties that are just universal to making a product profitable, So if you, for instance, if you want to sell dairy and make a profit, no matter the label, no matter if there's a humane certification, no matter if there's organic standards, certification, they have to take those babies away from the mothers right at birth or soon after birth. And that is incredibly traumatic for the babies, for the mothers. It's psychologically traumatizing for them, and it's one of the worst things. And it's why so many ethical vegans don't drink dairy. And it's one of the main core things, and that does not change no matter the label. They always take the babies away. For chickens, for chicken meat and chicken eggs, what would be a natural way? So if you're buying this egg that says it's organic and it's free range and you think it's natural, so what would be the natural way for a chick to be hatched? It would be in a nest with a mother hen sitting on the eggs. And do you know that actually when a mother hen sits on her eggs, they can communicate while the baby is still in the egg. They can coo and cluck to each other, and the baby can let the mom know that she needs more warmth, and the mother hen will turn the egg, whatever. I mean, it's just a beautiful, beautiful thing, a natural, beautiful thing for a mother hen to hatch her own eggs. This never happens in animal agriculture of any kind, no matter what the label. Never. No matter the label, free range, organic, whatever you're getting your eggs, if you're buying eggs in a carton, the baby chick never saw her mother hen. Baby chicks are born in hatcheries, and these industrial hatcheries are these horrible places where the eggs are hatched in these huge metal drawers. As soon as they're hatched, they're thrown into this world of just workers throwing them around, and conveyor belts and machinery, and it's heart-wrenching. I heard accounts from people that worked at hatcheries where the pace is so fast and they're so uncaring about these babies' lives that there will be little chicks with a wing halfway torn off or a leg torn off, and they'll just get thrown on the ground because they don't have time to deal with that injured, severely injured chick, and that chick will just suffer there for the entire day until he dies. These places are horror shows. And this is where every egg producer sources their chicks. Organic producers, free range producers, they will source their chicks from hatcheries. And the other horror is the baby males. I think that might be what you're about to ask, because it's true. And it's what is so unknown about all this. When we're talking about the egg industry, of course, it's only the females that lay eggs. And there's two different strains or strands, species, not species, but two different breeds kind of that have been bred of chickens. Sorry, I'm not getting the word right, but the layers that are bred for laying eggs, and the broilers, the broiler chickens that are bred for meat. So the layers, of course, have been bred to lay many eggs, way more eggs than they would in nature. In nature, their ancestors are the guinea fowl, of Southeast Asia. They lay maybe 2 clutches of eggs a year, maybe 24 eggs a year, and that's it. These chickens are laying like 200 eggs a day. It's horrible. Just so many, many, many eggs. and they're bred to do that. The broilers are bred to get big and meaty fast. The egg layers, of course, it's only the females that lay eggs. So when the baby boys are born, they don't grow fast enough to be profitable for meat. It's just not worth the effort to feed them. They won't grow quickly enough like the broiler chickens to be profitable for meat. So they're a waste product. They're just thrown away. The baby males in the egg industry are thrown away by the millions, by the billions. As soon as they're born, they're sexed. The workers will run a finger between their legs, determine if they're male or female. The little females are tossed into one chute, the males into another. The females, of course, are going to the organic farm and the free range farm. But the males are being disposed of. They are being thrown away by the billions in the backs of the hatcheries. They get thrown in these huge dumpsters. They get put in plastic bags to suffocate on the weight of their brothers. It is a nightmare. And some of them, they go down conveyor belts and are dropped into maceration machines, these big grinders that grind them up alive so they can be used for fertilizer and pet food and things like that. It's awful. It's truly heart-wrenching and awful when you learn about it, when you watch the videos, when you see what truly is happening. The egg industry has so much hidden horror, and the killing of these baby males is one of the biggest ones.
And I think anybody who's ever had a companion animal, a dog or a cat or a bird or what are those little guys, gerbils or whatever, that every single one of these creatures has their own personality. They're all different. Every individual human on the planet, we're all different. We're all individuals. And it's the same for these guys. They're just destroying all these little personalities. And chickens have amazing personalities. And when you go on to these farms that are called organic and free range, do you actually see, you see the labeling of what the farm is, but you don't really see the animal. So how can they be free range if we can't see them?
Yeah, interesting. So breaking down the labels a little bit, and then I'll talk about actually going to the farms, because I have been to some of these farms, and then I've also seen video of others. So the typical way for the last 50 years that we have gotten our eggs, or we have bred and confined hens for eggs, is in battery cages. And the battery cages are these cages that are stacked up and stacked on top of each other. The birds are crammed in there. What happened was, as we were exposing the cruelty in animal agriculture back in the 80s and 90s, the battery cage really got to be the kind of the poster child of the worst of the worst. And it was, rightly so. It was horrible that we were cramming these birds into these cages. It was like if you could imagine living in a crowded elevator your entire life. You know how uncomfortable it is to be in a crowded elevator, even if it's just for a few moments till you get to the next floor. Imagine that being all the space you were given in the world. It's horrible. So yes, battery cages were absolutely a torture chamber. So what happened is the industry started to respond to this criticism. And I think this is one of the not problems, but I would say the things that we should look at as activists as to what we criticize. Because if you get very specific, you got to be careful, because the industry might fix that, but then it's still no better. So that's why I think a vegan message is so important. This is just kind of an overall picture here of what I'm describing. But anyway, so what happened is they started going to cage-free settings. Okay, so cage-free basically is just the same barn, a big windowless warehouse, where they take the battery cages out and just put thousands of birds on the floor. Okay, So they're still totally crammed in. They're still got about as much space as that elevator, but it's just a huge space. They still have no sunlight to, to sun their feathers in. They still have no dirt to dust bathe. All the beautiful, natural, sweet things that chickens do, completely denied. They still have to fight each other for the food and water access. They're, it's horrible. It's just still a miserable, monotonous life in these windowless warehouses. And so that's now cage free. And now you can go to Starbucks and get your muffin with a cage free egg, where the animal's life is really no different. There's been no significant change. And the industry gets a win, So we need to be very careful, I think, about our messaging and what we criticize. But anyway, this is a great example in my area in Sonoma County. There's a company called Judy's Eggs, and they're the ones that you see at all the health food stores. You'd see them at the Natural Foods Co-op, and they were supposedly the best of the best. So on their packaging, there was grassy hills and this pastoral, beautiful scene with these chickens, a mama chicken with her little chicks, in the field, and then you go to their website. And they said things like, our chickens get to enjoy the wide open spaces of the Sonoma County hills, and, things like that. They'd say things like that. They'd have these pictures of these beautiful, rolling hills and greenery and grass and, this natural, beautiful scene. Well, some activists and I decided to go out to Judy's farms to see what it really looked like. Because it was in our area. We got word of where the address was. So we decided to actually go out and see. Well, what you actually see when you get there is you look around and guess what you don't see? Chickens. You don't see chickens, and you don't see hills, and you don't see grass. You don't, none of these things that they've mentioned. It's, kind of just a dirt lot, with these windowless warehouses. And when you walk up to the barns and look in, it's dark, it's dank, it's, dusty and horrible. The birds are just crammed in on the floor. There were birds that, had their feathers rubbed raw and off and looked sickly. And it was a nightmare. And so it was completely different than what they were portraying on the carton, what they were portraying on their website. None of it was true. Mm-hmm. And in fact, the Animal Legal Defense Fund, which is a wonderful national organization of animal lawyers that do lawsuits for animals. And I love their motto is that all our clients are really innocent. I always love that. But they are actually in the Sonoma County area, although they're a national organization, international really. But they filed a lawsuit against Judy's Eggs, claiming false advertising and consumer fraud and all of this. Took them to court, and ALDF won. Cool. And Judy's Eggs had to pay like big fines. They had to change all the wording on their website, and their cartons now, it's interesting because it's the same picture of this pastoral thing, but they took the chickens out, and now it's two children sitting like in the grass looking at the hills.
Okay. So I mean, it's like they know what they should be doing, and they want us to believe that they're doing what they should be doing. I don't know, that seems odd. So thankfully there's this organization that was able to do this. Yeah. But I mean, is there no oversight? Can you just slap a label on something and call it something, and there's no government intervention?
Pretty much. Yeah, all these labels that we've been talking about, free range, cage free, all those, what's the other one? Pasture raised, all of those. The only oversight is either the FDA or the USDA. And there's no, I mean, there's no on-site inspection. There's no, it's basically just the farmer's word. And he
Right.
just fills out an application, sends it in, and no one gets rejected. No one says, oh no, you can't. They'll just say something like, okay, be sure that they have access to the outside. Like for free range, they're supposed to have access to the outside. But what that could mean for these windowless warehouses that I'm talking about, they could have a little, like just a 5x5 concrete patio, that's connected to the barn, that they can open the doors for 5 minutes. There's no like, time frame as to how long they should have access to the outside. And it's so unappealing that no bird would even want to go out there, and they can call that free range, access to the outside.
Right.
So there's so little regulation. It's horrible. The only one of these labels that does have some oversight, some regulation is organic, the organic standards. There is on-site inspection and some regulation. But the thing with organic is that they're focused on environmental stuff. They're focused on the environmental issues. And so with organic dairy, with organic eggs, usually the rules have to do with like the feed that's fed to the animals. The feed needs to be organic and free of, chemicals, things like that. But as far as the treatment of the animals, the welfare of the animals, there's very little difference, if any. And interestingly, with organic, this is one of those instances where it can be even worse. So organic dairy is a really good example of this. In conventional dairy operations, same as organic, the cows are, they're overtaxed, they're stressed, their bodies have been used as just birthing machines. They're constantly kept pregnant, artificially inseminated. As soon as the baby is born, they've taken the baby away. As soon as they can, they inseminate her again. It's very intensive, the milking process, the filthy conditions. It's just miserable. So often these cows are sick, and they often get what's called mastitis. And mastitis is an infection of the udder. This is very common in dairy, where the udder swells. There can be pus, open sores. It can be very painful for her to be milked. And so in conventional dairy, it's become basically across the board common that they're giving the animals antibiotics, other medications to keep them from getting mastitis, or when they do get mastitis, to clear up the mastitis, right? So that's very common in commercial dairy. So now here we've got organic and the organic standards, and they're not allowed under the organic rules to give them pharmaceuticals and medications. So what happens? Well, they haven't changed the conditions any. So they're still getting mastitis, and they would have to take her out of production. If a cow gets mastitis, they'd have to take her out of production to be able to give her the medications. They wouldn't be able to sell the milk under the organic labeling. So they just don't. And when I was researching for my book, I had a veterinarian confide in me that he now was seeing, just in the last like 10 years, the worst cases of mastitis, where the cows had extreme cases where they had incredibly painful sores, were very painful while they were being milked, on the organic dairy farms, because they were not giving the cows the antibiotics and medications they needed to clear up the mastitis. So, there's a reason that we've been giving these animals medications, because they're in filthy conditions. They're sick. And now under the organic standards, we're not able to make them healthier. They're just sicker animals. So this is where these labels, it can be even worse.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I want to talk about lambs as well, because we're coming up to Easter. But before we leave the chickens, a lot of people like to have backyard chickens. What's your opinion on that?
Yeah. So with backyard chicken keeping, I mean, it is, of course, really, really increased. It's just, it's just such a popular hobby now, for the eggs, especially. And, I mean, this is, there's good and bad. Uh, it's a give and take. But there, I'll just say this. For myself and United Poultry Concerns, we encourage people to have backyard chickens, but as your companions, as companion animals, not necessarily getting them for the eggs. This is then you're commodifying these animals. You're getting them for a product. And we shouldn't look at animals this way. They should be our friends, our people that we take care for. And I use the term people for animals sometimes. I know that's a little odd for people, but I think that we need to get used to it because they are people too. Anyway, there's numerous things I think that if someone is going to get a backyard chicken, a chicken to keep as a companion animal, there's numerous things that we need to consider. And one is that you never want to buy a chick or a chicken ever. I don't care if it's Craigslist. I don't care if it's a feed store, whatever. Do not give someone money. I feel very strongly about this. I know that there's some controversy in that, and some people do rescue animals off Craigslist by buying them. I don't think we should. I think that we should not commodify animals ever. And there are other ways to do it. If you want to have a chicken, there's lots of rescues out there. There's lots of sanctuaries out there that have chickens that are, have more chickens than they can take care of, and you can take them home and care for them yourself. So there's other ways to get chickens other than buying them. Please rescue your chickens. And then, you really need, there's so much consideration that people don't realize. They need to have a secure place to be, a secure coop, because predation is prevalent, and even during the day sometimes there are predators that can come and kill your chickens. You need to be very vigilant and very careful, and have a protected place for them that needs to be cleaned frequently. They're not a cat with a litter box. They just go everywhere, so you got to keep it clean. And because their little bodies have been so manipulated and so compromised, chickens often get sick, especially reproductive issues with hens, because their uteruses and reproduction is so overworked from the egg laying. So just being aware that you're going to possibly have to spend money on medical attention and medical care, and having a vet that knows and cares about chickens. That's kind of a hard thing to find. Vets that actually know what's going on with the avian body. So need to be sure that you have someone like that close to you, so you can take a chicken there in an emergency. So there's a lot to consider. People are just like, oh, I'll just get a chicken, but you need to be sure that all these things are in place. And then as far as the eggs, even if there's this idyllic situation where your chickens are happy and everything's great, I still do not believe you should eat the eggs. And the reason is that we need to identify as vegans. It's very important to identify as vegans. And if you're eating eggs, then you are an egg eater. And I know there are some people, and I know some people actually that only eat their chicken's eggs. And that's great. If you can do that, there are worse things in the world. But, at the same time, it's hard then to consider yourself a vegan or say you're vegan.
And why do you feel so strongly about that we need to identify as vegan?
Well, okay, because as long as we are considering eggs food, there's going to be exploitation of chickens somewhere. It's great if you can get eggs from your neighbor where the chickens are happy and they're not going to slaughter the chickens, and that's your source of eggs. That's great. But guess what? There's 100,000 people living in Oakland that don't have that option. Mm-hmm. And if you're eating eggs, they want to eat eggs too. We can't feed 7 billion people with backyard eggs. it just can't be done. That's the reason the scaling up of industrial farming has happened. You know, it's the only way we're able to feed as many people eggs. So it's unfair, I think, and also really kind of a privileged position, like being privileged that you live in a rural area that's wealthy enough to have backyards and space for chickens and the money for chickens. You know, it's we need to stop seeing eggs and dairy and flesh, for that matter, as food.
Mm-hmm.
It's not food. You know, it's not food. We
Yeah,
need.
it seems like there's a line. You know, when I took me a long time, took me 10 years to get to vegan, but
Mhm.
thankfully I did. And then I realized it's a bit of a brain rewiring that no, you know what? It's not okay for me to wear these old wool socks anymore just because I've had them all this time and somebody already got, you know, had pain creating them. So therefore I'm honoring that body by wearing, like, you play all these mind games with yourself, it seems to me, as you're progressing into the vegan. And then once you're here, it's just a whole different wiring. It's just like, no, that's wrong. These were created from pain and suffering, and I don't want anything to do with them. And they're carrying that energy, and they're a reminder of that pain and suffering. So I hear you, and I hear it's a totally elitist thing, I think. If we think that, oh, well, I have my backyard. I mean, if you're lucky even to have a backyard, right?
Yeah, right.
And your chickens. So yeah, it's about rewiring our belief system back to where we were when we were children, I think, and when we all understood as children that you don't hurt these other creatures, they're for cuddling, and you know they're not ours to manipulate and exploit and profit from. We don't need to do it. It's causing us all great enormous harm. Here we are inside our cages, right?
Yeah,
And so,
yeah,
yeah, it's a total rewiring. And I really
yeah.
appreciate being in the company of others who understand that, because you don't really understand it until you get there. It seems,
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
you know?
Absolutely. And interestingly, like you were talking about the socks, I mean, like there's, like you were saying, there's this kind of like gray area, you know, like the backyard eggs and the wool socks and things like that we were talking about. And sometimes, you know, you can't really see how, you know, getting rid of your wool socks is going to like create a vegan world. You know, it doesn't really translate as far as, you know, A plus B equals C. But there's, I think, a spiritual component there. You know, there's a really embodying your ethics and living everything that you do, every move you make, every breath you take is for the animals, for compassion, for the planet. And, you know, there's an energy around everything, I believe. And I really think that that's, you know, where there is that beautiful, beautiful place when you come to veganism fully in and you realize, wow, you know, these things like these wool socks, it caused suffering. I don't want to be part of that. I can't be part of that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's it's really a freeing feeling. And I think deeply spiritual.
Deeply spiritual, yeah. One of my favorite people to go to for the spirituality component of this lifestyle philosophy is Will Tuttle.
Yes, absolutely.
And
Yeah.
he, I believe, taught at Berkeley or studied at Berkeley.
Yeah, he got his degree. He got his degree in education at Berkeley.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
And yeah, he talks about, you know, having researched the roots of all religions have this thou shalt not kill, the
Yeah.
golden rule, like do unto others, right?
Yeah.
So how have we gotten so far away from that? And when you talk about spirituality, do you want to talk some more about that?
Sure,
Yeah.
sure, absolutely. So yeah, for myself, you know, I was actually born and raised born again Christian, Southern Baptist. So I was deep in at the very beginning of my life, and by the time I was a teenager, the kind of rebellious, you know, activist in me had totally rejected all that, and I was atheist because it was just too extreme. Forget it. and I was atheist and then kind of moved into agnostic. So I can understand, I really can understand the criticisms of spirituality and religion. I understand that you could argue that religion has kind of taken us to this bad place, some of the bad places that we are in. But for me, what happened is, well, my husband is very into the Eastern philosophies, Eastern religions, Buddhism, Jainism, Hinduism, like Will Tuttle is. Will Tuttle was a Buddhist master, is a Buddhist master. He was a Buddhist monk, and I think he's still a Buddhist master, but anyway. So these religions are very, since I've been digging into them, my husband has his master's in Buddhism, and he's getting a PhD in Hinduism, and is very into these Dharma traditions. And digging into them, there's such beauty there, and such parallels to veganism and environmental protection, and all these beautiful things of caring for each other, for animals, for the planet. There's a lot of depth and beauty there that I really love. And so 3 concepts that I'll just talk about real quick: Dharma, karma, and ahimsa. And these 3 concepts are throughout all the 3 Dharma traditions. And I really love these 3 concepts. One is Dharma, and Dharma, it means various things, but in a large picture, it kind of means like the law of the universe, how the universe functions and works, and what the feeling is that we're very adharmic right now. A being negating, so we're kind of out of our dharmic. The world is in turmoil, right? Dharmic on a personal level, our swadharma is what we were put here to do, the meaning of life, our meaning of life. And I always resonated with this when I learned about my swadharma, because I knew I wanted to be an animal rights activist since I was very little. When people would ask me when I was a little girl what I wanted to be, I would say, I want to work with animals. And, I didn't know, of course, what that was going to look like, but I knew from when I was a child what my dharma was. So that's always really resonated with me, that we can tap into that swadharma, what we're supposed to be doing on this planet. Is really cool. So that's dharma. And then karma, of course, this one we're more familiar with in the West. And I think everybody can say on some level that they agree with the saying, like, what you do comes back to you, or what you put out, what energy you put out, you're going to get back, that kind of thing. And that's karma. Although when you get into it, it can go much deeper, and can also have to do with transmigration, with reincarnation, and other lives and things. But karma and animals and animal eating is throughout the literature, throughout the Vedic literature. They talk a lot about how basically killing and eating animals is the worst possible thing that you can do for your karma. And one saying is that if you harm an animal, however many hairs are on that animal's body, that's how many times you will suffer as well. You will come back and be reincarnated and suffer as well. So it really is a beautiful, I think, action and reaction. Like, we don't want to harm anyone, and that's another thing that I love about the Dharmic traditions, is that there's no line with your soul between the animal and human. You can come back as an animal, you can come back as a tree, you can come back as a whale, whatever. We're all connected in that we're just one big, beautiful, natural living thing. And so you don't want to harm, these animals that are part of you, that are connected. So that's karma. And then ahimsa is another beautiful concept. Ahimsa, this one, actually, this word is kind of being adopted by the vegan community. You see this word often at like Vegfest, and people have the little necklace of ahimsa or a t-shirt. And ahimsa is a Sanskrit word. It means, it literally means non-harming. Himsa means harm. Again, is negating. So ahimsa, non-harming. But really you could look at it as like dynamic compassion, like active dynamic compassion. And the term ahimsa paramo dharma means ahimsa is the highest law of the universe. Ahimsa should cover everything, should be most important for everything you do. Compassion for everyone and everything on the planet should really be the guiding force in your life. And then, then you will have the good karma that brings on the good dharma for the community, for the world. It's all connected. Anyway, I've gone off a little bit on that. I don't know how much people wanted to hear all that, but it's fun for me. It helps me because when I went through my atheist agnostic period, I was very angry and really just like, I felt really like it just pissed me off that everything seemed so unfair and everything seemed like so horrible and there was so much suffering. And I just it was frustrating. And when I started getting into these traditions and digging into this spiritual world, it started to help me make sense of things, and things made sense. And I was like, okay, that I can see how that makes sense, and helped me to move past my anger to a place of feeling more, what's the word? Accepting, connecting, that kind of thing to the planet, to the world. So it's helped me a great deal. Anyway.
Yeah, I'm with you there. And I practice yoga regularly, and ahimsa is a big part of that. And in yoga, we're specifically taught, it starts with ourselves. So do no harm to ourselves. Mm-hmm. And by extension, everybody else. So we could probably talk for another hour. An hour, how about that? I did want to talk about lambs and fishes. Should we do that another time? Or?
Yeah, let's do it another day. That would be great.
All right. Yeah. So in the meantime, we want to send people to find your book, The Ultimate Betrayal Is There Happy Meat. Is there somewhere other than Amazon we can go to find that book?
Yeah, it's on sale at Barnes and Nobles, and also on our Compassionate Living website. You can order it directly from my organization, Compassionate Living. So it's compassionate-living.org.
Okay, I'm going to
so you can go there.
And
also just sorry.
I'll post all your links with the video. So
great, awesome.
Yeah,
I did want to give a quick plug to UPC as well, upc-online.org. There's some amazing, it's just an archive of great information there. Okay,
and so then the Climate Diet Summit in mid-April, are you guys exploring a different way of doing that?
No, it was an online summit to begin with.
Oh, perfect.
Yes, I know, right? Thank God. I think that the organizers are very relieved that, they decided to do an online summit. So it's going forward just as planned, April 14th to 18th, I believe. And I'll be speaking on the second day, day 2. So I think the 15th. But there's like 16 amazing speakers, all on the connection between animal agriculture and the climate crisis. So.
Wow, that's fantastic. So people can subscribe to that and plug into that somehow or another. I'll put that link as well then. Great. That's awesome. Thank you so much, Hope, for taking this time today and sharing all that wonderful information. I really believe that a vegan future might be something we can hang on to. It's something I hold on to in my imagination to get us out of this place we're at right now.
That's right.
Thank you for what you're doing to help build that.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. All right. Namaste.
Namaste.